The rain had not stopped for 3 endless days. The world outside Claire's apartment was swallowed in gray. Heavy clouds sagged over the skyline, and the rhythmic tapping of rain against the windowpane became a cruel reminder of the storm both around and within her. Claire sat in silence, her fingers wrapped around a chipped mug of tea that had long gone cold. The steam had vanished hours ago, but she hadn't noticed. Her gaze was fixed on the world outside, though her mind was trapped somewhere deep inside her own despair. Once, she had been the woman who sang softly while cooking, who whispered prayers before sleep, who believed that God saw every tear. But life had stripped away those certainties, one piece at a time. Her mother's death had been the beginning, a quiet unraveling. Then came the layoff from the marketing firm she had worked at for years. Restructuring, they'd called it, as if the word could soften the blow of losing the one thing that had kept her standing. Within months, the bills started piling up, each one a silent accusation of failure. Her phone buzzed on the counter, flashing a notification from the landlord, final notice. Eviction scheduled for Friday. Friday, only 3 days away. She stared at the message until the words blurred through her tears. Her heart ached in a way she couldn't put into words, a heavy, suffocating ache that made even breathing feel like an effort. She whispered, almost in defiance, "God, are you still there?" No answer, only the hum of the rain. That night, the loneliness wrapped around her like a blanket woven from fear and silence. She curled up on the couch, unable to sleep, unable to pray. Her thoughts chased each other in cruel circles. What did I do wrong? Why me? When sleep finally came, it was shallow and restless. She dreamed of falling down an endless pit where light couldn't reach. And in that darkness, she screamed for help, but her voice made no sound. She jolted awake to a crash of thunder that shook the walls. The apartment was cloaked in blackness, the power had gone out. Her heart pounded as she fumbled for her phone to use as a flashlight. The storm outside howled, but within that chaos, a strange stillness began to press against her soul, like something unseen was there, watching, waiting. Then she heard it, Claire. It wasn't a sound in the room. It was deeper, softer, as though it came from within her own heartbeat. She froze. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The silence stretched, and then came the voice again, calm, steady, filled with a peace that felt both alien and familiar. "I am your refuge now." Claire's breath caught in her throat. Her first instinct was fear. She turned on the flashlight, sweeping it across the room. Nothing, only shadows. But she could feel something, an unseen warmth that wrapped around her like invisible arms. "God," she whispered. The air itself seemed to hum with life, and though no sound echoed in her ears, words formed clearly in her soul. "You have cried alone for too long. You searched for me in the noise, but I have been here, in the silence." Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, tears flowing freely. I don't understand," she stammered. "Why now? After everything, why now?" The whisper came again, filled with love so vast it made her weep harder. "Because now, you are still enough to hear me. You no longer cling to what was lost, so now your hands are open to what I will give." Her trembling fingers pressed against her chest. The heaviness inside her was breaking apart, piece by piece. It was as if light was seeping into every crack of her broken heart. For months, she had begged for answers, for miracles, for anything to prove that heaven still cared. Yet in that quiet, candlelit moment, she realized, God had never left. He had waited. The storm raged outside, thunder rolling like distant drums, but inside the tiny apartment, the atmosphere shifted. It was no longer cold, no longer hopeless. It was sacred. Claire wept, not from sorrow this time, but from release. Every drop of pain she had held inside poured out, and in its place came peace, a deep, steady calm that wrapped around her heart like a promise. "Thank you," she whispered through her tears. "Even if I don't understand everything, thank you for not letting go." And for the first time in what felt like years, she believed the words she spoke. The storm slowly began to fade. The rain softened to a gentle patter, and somewhere in the distance, she thought she heard the faint chirp of a bird. Dawn was approaching. As light began to break through the clouds, painting silver streaks across the sky, Claire sat quietly by the window, watching the world come back to life. Her problems hadn't vanished. The bills were still there, the eviction still loomed, but something far greater had shifted inside her. She wasn't alone anymore. A warmth pulsed through her as she heard the final whisper before the dawn fully broke. You are safe now, not because the storm is gone, but because I am with you in it. I am your refuge, Claire. Always have been, always will be. She closed her eyes, letting the peace of those words settle deep in her chest. For the first time in a long, long time, she smiled. The sun broke through the clouds then, casting a golden glow through the rain-streaked glass, and Claire whispered, I'm still here too, God. I'm still here. And in that moment, fragile yet holy, she knew the truth. Faith doesn't always end the storm, but it gives you the courage to walk through it, hand in hand with the one who never leaves. The morning after that storm felt different, lighter, quieter, sacred. The sun streamed through Claire's window, scattering golden light across the room like a gentle promise. She stood there for a long time, soaking in the warmth, her heart still echoing with the words she had heard, I am your refuge now. The world hadn't suddenly turned perfect, far from it. The bills still sat on her counter. Her job was still gone. The eviction notice still glared at her from the door. Yet, somehow, none of it carried the same weight anymore. The fear had loosened its grip. Something had taken its place, something unshakable. For the first time in months, Claire smiled at her own reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were still tired, but there was a quiet strength behind them now. You're not done yet, she told herself softly. And neither is he. She began her morning differently that day. Instead of collapsing under worry, she knelt beside her couch and whispered, Thank you, God. For the storm, for the silence, for still being here. It wasn't a perfect prayer. It was raw, broken, and full of pauses, but it was real. And that, she felt, was all that God ever wanted. Later that afternoon, as she walked to the grocery store, she found herself noticing things she had ignored for months. The laughter of a child splashing in puddles, the way the sunlight shimmered on wet leaves, the sound of her own footsteps echoing on the pavement. Everything felt alive, and somehow, she felt part of that life again. It was the smallest thing that started the chain of blessings. At the checkout counter, the elderly woman in front of her dropped a few coins. Claire bent down quickly to help, and the woman smiled at her. Thank you, dear, she said. You remind me of my granddaughter. She always helped everyone too. That simple moment led to a conversation, then an invitation. The woman, Mrs. Sanders, owned a small bookstore downtown and needed someone to help part-time since her assistant had fallen ill. Claire's heart skipped. A bookstore? Yes, Mrs. Sanders said with a kind smile. You seem like someone who loves quiet places and stories. 2 days later, Claire started working there. It wasn't much money, but it was something, a beginning. And as she shelved books and dusted old covers, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. But even as new hope began to take root, life tested her faith again. One evening, as she was locking up the store, she noticed a man sitting outside on the curb. His clothes were soaked, and his hands trembled from the cold. Beside him sat a crumpled cardboard sign, hungry. Please help. Claire hesitated. She barely had enough money for her own dinner that night. But as she turned to leave, that familiar voice stirred in her heart again, soft, steady, unmistakable. I am your refuge. Be his. She stopped in her tracks. Her fingers tightened around the paper bag carrying her sandwich. Slowly, she turned and walked toward the man. Here, she said gently, handing him the bag. It's not much, but please take it. The man looked up, startled. His eyes, tired, weary, and hollow, filled with tears. Are you sure? Claire nodded. Yes, I already have what I need. He took the sandwich with shaking hands. I prayed today, he said softly. I asked God if he still saw me. A lump rose in Claire's throat. She knelt beside him, rain beginning to fall again, and whispered, He does. He sent me to tell you that. They sat there for a moment, two broken souls in the drizzle, both realizing that God had never stopped listening. When she finally walked home, her clothes were damp, but her heart was glowing. She couldn't stop smiling through her tears. That night, as she lay in bed, she prayed again, this time not for herself, but for the man she had met. And somewhere in the stillness, she felt that same warmth she had felt before, the divine whisper of comfort. You were my hands today. You were my refuge for him, as I am for you. Claire pressed her hands to her chest. Thank you, she murmured. Use me again, Lord. However you want. From that day onward, Claire's life became a quiet miracle of small, holy moments. She started volunteering at the local shelter on weekends. She read stories to children who had no homes. She visited the elderly woman who had given her the job and helped around her house. And through it all, she felt God working in every conversation, every tear, every smile. Her circumstances didn't change overnight, but her heart had changed completely. She no longer asked, "Why me?" but instead, "What do you want to do through me?" Months later, on a bright Sunday morning, Claire stood outside the church she hadn't entered in over a year. Her heart pounded as she stepped through the doors, sunlight spilling across the pews. The music swelled, and tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "I'm home." She realized then that refuge didn't mean escaping life's storms, it meant finding shelter in God through them. It meant resting in the truth that even in loss, He was enough. When the service ended, a woman sitting beside her turned and smiled. "You look like someone who's been through a lot," she said kindly. Claire laughed softly. "I have, but I also found someone who carried me through it." As she stepped out into the morning light, the wind brushed gently against her face, almost like a whisper. "You are never alone, Claire. When fear rises, I am your calm. When the world turns away, I remain. I am your refuge, now and always." Her eyes lifted toward the sky, glowing gold and blue. The same world that once felt empty now shimmered with quiet miracles. And as she walked home, each step steady and full of peace, she whispered the same words that had saved her. "You are my refuge." The world could change, the storms could come, but she would never again face them alone.